Welcome to the buried truth. It was just before midnight, 11:47 p.m. to be exact, when Ethan Miller stepped back into his house after a long, grueling shift. The moment he crossed the threshold, a wave of unsettling quiet washed over him. The silence was heavy, unnatural. His dog, who usually greeted him with a chorus of barks, was nowhere to be heard. His living room light was on, a detail that pricked at the back of his mind because he never, ever left it on. And the front door. It wasn't fully closed. It was just slightly ajar, as if someone had just left. At first, Ethan tried to rationalize it. He was tired, exhausted even. Maybe he'd been forgetful this morning. Maybe a strong gust of wind had pushed the door open. But a deep, primal instinct in his gut screamed that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just an oversight. This felt intentional, drawn by an invisible thread of dread. Ethan walked over to the small security monitor he kept near his kitchen. He'd installed a simple 3-camera system just a month earlier, one for the driveway, one covering the living room, and one pointed directly at the front door. With a trembling hand, he pressed the play button on the day's recordings. The footage began, the timestamp glowing in the corner, 10:31 p.m., exactly 1 hour and 16 minutes earlier. Ethan's body went rigid. A figure, cloaked entirely in black from head to toe, was on the screen. The person didn't break the lock or smash a window. Instead, they calmly inserted a key into the lock and opened his front door. A duplicate key. The intruder moved with an eerie confidence, a familiarity that sent shivers down Ethan's spine. There was no rush, no panic. It was as if they'd been inside his home countless times before. Ethan's breathing became shallow, his chest tightening with fear. Someone had been in his house. Someone had walked through his private space while he was away. He watched, mesmerized by the horror unfolding on the tiny screen. The intruder roamed the living room, methodically opening drawers, peering behind picture frames, running a hand along his bookshelf. They weren't stealing anything. There was no frantic search for valuables. It was more like an inspection, a search for something incredibly specific. Then, at 10:36 p.m., the scene took a terrifying turn. The figure finally looked up, their gaze locking onto the small, blinking light of the camera in the corner. They knew they were being watched. They stared directly into the lens, holding Ethan's gaze through the screen. And then, they smiled. His heart pounded in his ears as he double-clicked it. The moment the video started playing, his blood ran cold. The footage was of him, secretly recorded, in his own home, while he thought he was alone. In his car, during his daily commute, at his workplace, from a distance. Even footage of him sleeping in his own bed. Each clip was a violation, a stripping away of his privacy, his safety. But the last clip was the one that broke him. It was a video shot from his own backyard camera. It showed the same masked intruder, standing just a few feet from his window, watching him as he moved around inside his house. The timestamp confirmed his worst fear. Last night, the stalker hadn't just been in his house tonight. They had been watching him for days. Ethan fumbled for his phone, his fingers barely able to dial the numbers. 9-1-1. Within minutes, the flashing lights of police cars painted his quiet street in red and blue. Officers swept through the house, their professional calm, a stark contrast to the terror raging inside him. But everything seemed untouched. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing out of place. It was the duplicate key that bothered them the most. It suggested a level of planning that was deeply disturbing. The police asked Ethan the standard questions. Do you have any enemies? Is there anyone who might want to target you? Has anyone had access to your home recently? To every question, Ethan's answer was a frustrated no. He lived a simple, solitary life. He worked a normal office job. He had no major conflicts, no past dramas that could explain this. The whole situation made no sense. It was a puzzle with a terrifying, missing piece. The next day, detectives took a closer look at the security footage, and that's when they found it. A tiny detail that Ethan, in his panic, had completely missed. For the most part, the intruder was covered, but in one single frame, for less than a second, as the man reached out, his sleeve rolled up just enough to reveal a tattoo on his wrist. A tattoo of a coiled, blue serpent. For the detectives, that symbol was an instant recognition. It was the signature of a man named Marcus Hale, a prime suspect in 5 other home invasion cases across the state, all of which had gone cold. The pattern was identical. The victims were never robbed, never physically attacked, but each one had been systematically stalked, followed, and secretly recorded for months. Their lives turned into a private horror movie for their tormentor. Armed with this new lead, detectives raided Marcus's last known hideout that evening. What they discovered inside was the stuff of nightmares. There were boxes upon boxes filled with USB drives, just like the one left for Ethan. They found folders meticulously labeled with names, daily schedules, and addresses of dozens of random people. There were hundreds of hours of recorded videos capturing his victims in their most private, unaware moments. And in the newest folder, at the very top of the pile, was Ethan's name. But Marcus himself was gone. He had vanished, seemingly into thin air, just hours before the raid. To this day, Marcus Hale remains a fugitive, a ghost in the system. Ethan couldn't stay. The violation was too deep. He moved out that very night. He changed his number, quit his job, and left the state, hoping to leave the nightmare behind him. But sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet, his phone will buzz. A private message from an unknown number. There's never any text. Just a video file, a short clip, recorded from somewhere just outside his new home. And in the shadows, you can just make out the same figure, with the same cold, terrifying smile. Still watching, still waiting. The moral of this story is a chilling one. Never ignore the small signs. A door left slightly ajar, a strange sound in the night, a light that shouldn't be on. Sometimes, these aren't just accidents or coincidences. Sometimes, they're warnings. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like, share, and subscribe for more content from The Buried Truth.